Mr. Das Gupta, Mr. Gogoi, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. And I know how difficult it is to speak in a post-lunch session, but still I will try to be interactive also. Now the session is on basically on the impact of the proposed legislation on the autonomy of the states and the role of the states and the regulatory independence of the regulators and their role in the change scenario. So that is a basic thing. Now, as we all know, Government of India has presented this bill in the Parliament, and Parliament has referred to the Standing Committee on Energy of the Parliament. And the Standing Committee has heard various stakeholders. They also invited the regulators in one meeting and heard all the regulators of the country. In addition, they also referred the matter to a forum of regulators, and forum of regulators in turn had discussion in the forum with all the state regulatory commissions and the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and certain views have emerged. Generally, the regulators have welcomed the proposed amendments, but they have felt that certain provisions of the bill will impact on the autonomy of the states, the federal polity of the country, and functioning of the state, and also the regulatory independence and flexibility of the regulators, which have been provided to the regulators under the present Electricity Act. I don't know what has been the motive behind proposed changes to impact on the regulatory autonomy. We'll discuss this. I will like to touch only 4 or 5 provisions which are related to the role of the states and their functions and their independence. Some of the aspects my colleague Mr. Gogoi will also touch. I will try to talk about 4 or 5 issues which are there in the bill. One issue is the role of regulators post-amendment, which is one of the topics of this session. Now, as we know, earlier, under various sections of the existing Act, Section 61, Section 79, and 86, there are 3 sections which talk about the role of national electricity policy, the national electricity plan, and the tariff policy in guiding the regulators in discharge of functions. Now, what is proposed now is that the national tariff policy shall be followed by the regulators. That is what is proposed, which means that it will become mandatory and the regulators will not have any flexibility, because there has to be state-specific flexibility considering the local conditions, local status of the power sector, local level of losses. There has to be some amount of flexibility which is proposed to be taken away through this bill. This needs to be thought about by the government. Now, the second issue is the intervention of the central government. Central government has sought through various provisions in the bill to intervene in various aspects. One is Section 12, which says that more than one distribution licensee can be permitted in the same area. But there, the central government has carved out a role for itself. Now, whether central government should intervene in distribution matters is a question one must think about. The proposal says that the central government will prescribe. I will try to read that proposal, section 12. It says that that the central government, in consultation with the appropriate commission, may in public interest permit more than one distribution licensee. I think it's not required. This function of distribution has already been regulated successfully for quite some time by various regulatory commissions. And I think personally that there is no need for the central government to allow a distribution licensee, because in any case there is a mandate given in subsequent provision that the regulator cannot refuse a license to a subsequent supplier on the ground that already there is a existing supply licensee. So once that mandate is there to the regulatory commission, there is no need to central government saying that more licenses should be allowed. The other provision where the central government wants to carve out its role in distribution sector is through amendments in section 51 of the Act, and they intend to introduce two subsections, 51B1 and section 51B2. What did it say? Section 51B1 and section 51B2. This says, there is a proposal provide that subsequent supply licensee shall have the duty to supply electricity progressively based on the load factor of the consumers as specified by the central government. So which means that if a new supply licensee comes, his service obligation will gradually be universalized. It will not be one go, and it will be as specified by the central government. Again, I don't see any reason why the central government should specify. In any case, regulations are specified by various regulatory commissions, and even in case of open access, regulatory commissions have laid down a roadmap for introduction of open access. Therefore, I think the job is better left to the regulatory commissions, who, considering the local conditions, can specify the manner in which the roadmap for universal service obligation of a new licensee will be operationalized. The other is the proposed provision of section 51B2. This says that any consumer in the area of supply shall have the option to choose any of the supply licensee for supply of electricity to his premises in such a manner as prescribed by the central government. Again, I think the choice to the consumer should be unqualified totally. The consumer should have the choice to select his own supplier, and there should be no prescription by the central government about the manner in which it can be done. Then again, there is a proposal to amend section 66 of the Act, that Commission will promote market and will also promote market for energy efficiency. And in doing so, the regulator will be guided by national electricity policy, which is all right, but also guided by any other direction issued by the central government. Again, I don't see any reason if a thing comes in the national electricity policy, it already guides the regulators. There's no need to have a separate direction from the central government about the way in which the regulators will promote market for electricity and market for energy efficiency. So that was the second set of amendments, which has serious repercussion about the regulatory independence, regulatory flexibility of the Regulatory Commission. Now the third aspect is about the review of the performance of the regulatory commissions and of the individual members of the Regulatory Commission. The first part of the proposal is that the performance of the Regulatory Commission shall be reviewed by a committee which will be constituted by the Forum of Regulators. That's all right. I mean, that has been the international practice. Normally, the associations do the peer review of the performance of various member bodies. But then it talks about submission of a report to the central government. I don't know what the central government is going to do with that report, because the peer review, if it is published by the Forum of Regulators, it will itself have a peer pressure on all the Regulatory Commission, and I don't think there is any need to submission to the central government. And
sir, at the moment there is no such reporting system at all. You do this. At the moment there is no such system.
no, but normally there is a comparative study done. Regulatory bodies.
And it goes to the government also.
No, it doesn't go to the government. And what will the government do? I don't know. Now, the second thing is that, you know, there is a provision for removal of the member on certain ground of misconduct, etc. One of the ground which is proposed to be added is that the committee of Forum of Regulators will also review the performance of individual members, and based on that report, the central government can remove any member of any commission. Now, there is a serious lacuna in this, because regulatory commissions are collegiate body. They do all the hearings collectively, they pass all the orders collectively. So if at all there is a performance, it is a performance of the Regulatory Commission. I don't know how the committee or the central government will adjudge the performance of any individual member. I don't see any reason. And secondly, you see the history of all regulatory bodies, worldwide or in India particularly. There is no such provision in any other regulatory body, because the grounds for removal are various. Main ground is the misconduct. If somebody is guilty of misconduct, he can be removed. But on the ground of performance, I don't know, firstly, how it can be judged and how a person can be removed and does. So that was the third set of issues that I wanted to point out. And the fourth issue is separation of carriage and content. This has been discussed. I don't want to touch on this, but this issue was also discussed in the Forum of Regulators. You know, apprehensions have been raised by various incumbent distribution licensees that they will lose revenue if a new supply licensee is inducted. That has been the concern. The Forum of Regulators have felt, and all the regulators have felt, the one way to do it is that you introduce a roadmap for the new incumbent licensee and say up to 10 kilowatt in the first stage, he must supply power to consumers up to 10 kilowatt if somebody opts for that licensee, and then gradually go upward. I don't think whether this will work, but that has been the view. I have a very drastically rational view on this. My view is that you remove all cross subsidies and have the tariff which is reflective of the cost of supply exactly. Therefore, there is no loss of revenue for anybody, because tariffs are cost reflective, all are equitable tariff. There is no cross subsidy. And let the government subsidize the low-end consumers, because government wants it's a political issue. And since the government needs resources for that purpose, the government can impose electricity duty on high-end consumers. So indirectly, it will be a cross subsidy, But the incumbent distribution licensee or the supply licensee will not be affected adversely. That is a very, very rational view. I don't know. This can be done because the government will not have any financial implication because they will collect revenue in any case from high-end consumers and subsidize the low-end consumers.
Electricity duty, which you are.
Yeah, yes.
That will almost like cross subsidy.
It is cross subsidy.
cross-subsidy.
But the licensee is not affected. The incumbent licensee will not be affected. So that was the fourth issue. And then fifth issue, which is in the agenda, is about the regulatory assets. The proposed amendment says that there should be no revenue deficit in the ARR. When you approve the ARR and tariff, there should be no revenue deficit, which means there should be no regulatory asset. This is a very, very most welcome step. We have been following it in Bihar. We normally try to avoid regulatory assets compared to the regulatory assets you have in Delhi or in Tamil Nadu and many other states. This is not at all a desirable thing because you are killing the distribution licensee. So that is a most welcome step. And the bill also talks about the past liability of the incumbent DISCOM, for which the government has to come out with a formula because it will be impossible in many cases to pass on the past liability to the present consumers because wherever they have approved regulatory assets in the past, there are huge regulatory assets of the order of thousands of crores of rupees. And I think it will be very difficult for any state and for any regulator to pass on the entire past liability on the consumers. It will not be at all possible or desirable. And rightly, the central government has come out with a proposal to amend the act and provide that this will be dealt as prescribed by the government. That will take care of the past liability. And in future, I am also of firm belief, and I think everybody should support it, that there should be no regulatory assets at all in the whole system. So these were some of my views on various issues. There are other issues also, but I think there are other members also who would like to deliberate on those issues. And so thank you very much.